Good evening, everybody. Welcome to sake class. Tonight is Get to Know Sake, and I am Molly Moran. I'm the owner of Table Wine, and I'm so excited to teach this class. I scheduled my very first ever sake class after a lot of you asked me if I would teach a class on it, and people had been asking for a while. I finally last year scheduled it for about this time, April of 2020. Intending it to be an in-person class. And then, COVID happened and it got postponed. And then it just kept kind of getting pushed back by more pressing interests, I guess. And so I'm really happy to be teaching this because it's something that I've loved for a really long time personally. And it's not something that flies off the shelf at Table Wine, so I don't often get a chance to talk about it. We carry a couple usually, so it's just kind of fun to get to do something new and unexpected. So thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't had a second, if you're watching live and you haven't had a moment to fill out the poll, please do so. It's one question and it really helps me kind of gauge who's with us tonight. It looks like most people have had sake a little bit. A couple people have never had it, which I find so exciting. I really love it. I remember the first time I had sake and how it kind of, was just unlike anything else I'd ever had before. So I hope that you have that kind of moment. And then there are a couple aficionados, a couple people who are saying like, hey, I have it at least once a month, which is also super exciting. That's cool. And again, kind of like unexpected. So that's great. And there is the ongoing question of what everybody's looking forward to this weekend. So if you're joining us live, join in the chat. We use the chat a lot during classes. So please, if you're new to these, this is your chance to ask questions as we are tasting, throw out whatever it is, whatever idea you have, whatever tasting note you have. That's what the chat is for. It looks like people are expecting outside weather this weekend, which I'm excited about because I kind of gave up looking at the forecast more than just like a day ahead because it's been kind of cold and kind of gray. And so I agree with all of you that I'm hoping to, if there is the sunshine that you're all talking about, I hope that I also get to get out and enjoy it. So without further ado, let's dive in to sake. So my assumption was that most people, are pretty new to sake. So I'm keeping it at a pretty high level, but obviously if you have more in-depth questions, that's what the chat is for. So feel free to ask them. So fundamentally, sake is basically just like beer. It's instead of grain, it's rice. It's fermented rice and water. That's the real short version of what sake is. Before they before they use the rice to ferment, they do what is called polishing. And that's milling it down. So just like milling a grain, they mill the rice. And the more you can imagine, all rice that is being used to make sake is brown rice. And so they want to get rid of the husk because it doesn't impart delicious flavors as much as we might enjoy eating brown rice. You don't necessarily want those flavors in your drink. So they're going to get rid of the husk and then they're going to polish it down. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So there are all of these different gradations of how much it's polished. So the more polished the rice, it definitely affects the body and the flavor of the sake. So if there's one thing that I want you to kind of start to pay attention to when you are drinking it or ordering it out at a sushi restaurant or whatever, is that kind of like, what do you like? And kind of explore this idea of the polishing. I figured people were going to ask, so I'm just going to get it out of the way right now. Traditionally, sake was served warm because it wasn't really very good. And so serving it warm kind of hid the flaws. And so they could get away with not such great product. And it tasted fine warm. That's falling out of style more and more over the last few decades. And sake is part of formal sommelier training. So as more sommeliers around the world get to know sake somewhat, I mean, they don't study it the way they study wine, I'm not going to lie, but as they start to see it as an option for wine pairings in fine dining restaurants, as things to include on cool cocktail lists, like that kind of thing, the idea of like a sweet, not so interesting sake warmed up and served in a little cup is kind of falling out of favor. If that's how you've enjoyed it in the past and you've enjoyed drinking it that way, rock on. Everything that we're going to drink tonight is, at least we're serving it cold, and we'll talk about ones that you could serve warm. So that's the warm story. If you've never had warm sake and you want to explore it, we can talk about that when the time comes. But tonight's about cold chilled sake. And from a glassware perspective, I'm going to be tasting out of a wine glass. If you have the little sake cups, those are great, and they are intended for warm sake. So you can drink out of those tonight, absolutely. If you like little glassware, I love little glassware, and I kind of debated as to what I wanted to drink out of tonight. But I do like a wine glass from a aroma standpoint. You can stick your nose in it a little bit more. So drink whatever you want. Mike's making the point that the recipe really does sound more like beer than water. Absolutely. And they're called, the places where sake are made are referred to as breweries. So it is, it's brewing. So the grades of sake all comes down to how polished the rice is. So there's a percentage number. It's not often seen on the bottles. Although sake websites, sake breweries have amazing websites, like such thorough information. And so this number, seimai pardon me, is the percent of rice that's remaining after the polishing. So the lower the number, the more delicate that grain of rice is. So for instance, we're going to taste, the Junmai doesn't have one, but let's say that it said 60%. That means 40% of the grain of rice has been polished away. I don't love the word polish because in my mind, it means like somebody's like doing that by hand and milled away. So there are these different I keep saying degradations instead of gradations. Sorry about that. There are these different gradations, classifications of how polished the rice has to be classified as these different grades of sake. So they're here on the slide for you. For instance, Hanjozo is kind of the larger bucket. It's the least polished and therefore kind of, in theory, the least high quality. So it's a 70% marker. And so that means only 30% of the rice has been polished away. And then you kind of go up from there. The rice can absolutely 100% be polished more than that. So these are just kind of like the markers for where they can be. So if you think about, for instance, Rioja has this like aging classification system where it has to, you have to meet a certain aging classification to be Crianza and then a certain aging classification to be Reserva. But you can absolutely 100% age a bottle of Rioja for 20 years and it would still be considered just Reserva because that's kind of, that would be kind of where it stops. So in this instance, it could be considered Daiginjo and it could be 20% or something of that sort. I mention it because if you get into sake and start to like learn a lot, these brewers are like, like all brewers, I lovingly roll my eyes. Like all brewers, they need to be like the most extreme. So people are saying like, we have a 1%, we've polished away 99% of the rice. As you can imagine, if you polish away more and more and more and more, the grain is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It's very delicate. It's a time-consuming process. The chance of, it going wrong increases, and you need more, right? You absolutely need more rice to make the same amount if you're milling it that much. And therefore, the gradations also do tend to tie into price. So if you are particularly, I would say, out at a restaurant for sushi. So that might not be happening currently, depending on your lifestyle. But in the future, if you're out and you're looking at a sake list, you might notice that things like a daiginjo are going to be a bigger price point for sure. Linda's asking the question, if sake is more like beer than wine, why is it more associated with wine? So I think the easiest answer to that is because of the way it tastes. It's much more delicate in flavor than beer. It's still usually, now granted, we have one that is sparkling, but we'll talk about that. That's a pretty new thing. And so it just had a clearer correlation to wine because it has similar kind of complexity and delicate things going on rather than hops and kind of like all that kind of goes with beer. So I hope that explains it. Other varieties of sake worth mentioning that we are going to taste, nigiri, which is unfiltered, namas, which are unpasteurized. So they basically come out, most of them come out once a year. There are a few breweries that are doing them year round, but you don't see them that often, and they will be chilled. As in, if you found them in a shop, they should be in a cooler. They can't sit on a shelf even for a small period of time. They are unpasteurized. So you might have to like do some digging if that's interesting to you. Sparkling, which we'll taste, and infused is kind of like the new thing that we're heading towards. And it's often infused with yuzu, which is an Asian citrus. If you're not familiar with yuzu, it's amazing. And we're going to have we have a small production yuzu infused sake coming to Table Wine in a week or two. So if you are here in Madison and you want to get on that train, it's fabulous. It's in a very large bottle. It's like a 700 milliliter bottle, but it's delicious. So there's that. Other questions as I'm going. Danielle and Cameron make the point of like, considering that sake was served warm, it also kind of like veers away from being anything like beer, although wine's not served warm either, all that traditionally, other than the mulled wine thing. So really it should be just considered its own special thing. Rice wine, for the record, rice wine is a separate thing. So there is rice wine made in various countries in Asia, most notably, I believe, China. And that is a different thing. So if you do a lot of cooking of East Asian cuisines, you might see recipes that are calling for rice wine, or, I think a lot of us know rice wine vinegar. That's different from sake. Sake is its own category of drink. Let's talk about sweetness, everybody. So sake, for those of us, I know a lot of people joining us tonight are wine-minded people. So my comparison here is just to make you aware of the fact that sake is less acidic than wine. And acid tricks your mind into thinking that things aren't as sweet as they are. So without the acid there, we're all across the board going to pick up on a little bit more sweetness. There is a sweetness scale. Again, it's not something that you're going to usually find on the label, but you might be able to find it on a website. Or if you're at a reputable place, you can kind of talk to people, the person helping you, the server, something like that, about how sweet it is. So on this scale, 0 is neutral. And as the numbers go down into the negatives, they get sweeter and sweeter and sweeter, with -15 being the sweetest. And as numbers go up in the positive integers to +15, they're drier. So the sweetest that we are tasting tonight is -4. And then the other two are in the dry scale. I purposefully picked these kind of knowing the crowd, knowing my people. I know that you don't all gravitate towards sweet things. And so I really wanted to kind of get away from any bad ideas that anybody has about sweet, warm, boring sake. Like, that's just like not what I was interested in talking about tonight. So I don't mind a little bit of sweetness, but I know that some of you do. Any questions about any of like the fundamental stuff before we start? Okay. if you haven't already poured yourselves some of the junmai, do it. So, things to know about junmai. Junmai means, literally translates to just rice and water. So the junmai, the word junmai is going to come into play in a couple of different ways. So here we are talking about junmai, the grade of sake. So it is made with rice, filtered water, and then all sake is made with koji mold. They're all inoculated. The rice is inoculated with a mold that gets things to start growing, which then allows the sugars to start to ferment. So without the koji mold inoculation, you would just have rice soaking in water indefinitely. So they do need to kind of get it started. So all sake is made in that way. So junmai sakes are kind of, as you can think of them as like the most straightforward, and that's why we're starting here. Going back, actually, I'll bring it back up for just a second. So on the grades of sake, junmai, in this context, there's no minimum for how much the rice can be polished. So it can be polished very little, it can be polished quite a bit, and there's no necessary amount there. So when I'm talking about them, I'm going to say, generally speaking, they are fuller in body, right? Because they're not quite as polished. They tend to have a little bit more weight to them. And you do tend to get a little bit of acid in it, in a junmai, more than you do in some of the other styles. Questions coming in, does the mold take the place of yeast for the fermentation? Yes, it does. So the mold kind of gets it going. And then I believe that there is yeast as well. That come about, sorry, my mind just went totally blank there. There are yeast, like native yeast, but in terms of inoculating, you're going to inoculate with the mold to kind of get the whole thing going. So does the amount of rice polishing correlate to the ABV? Not really, no. So the polishing, so sake in general tends to hover around 15 or 16%. That's like the most common for kind of the most classic styles. Some of the ones that we're going to taste, we're going to veer off the more beaten path a little bit. But for the most part, they tend to kind of be like a stronger ABV wine. So feel free to sniff, taste, tell me what you think. The food pairings here are for this specific sake. They came from the brewery's own recommendations, because as you can kind of, even just on the nose and then on the palate a little bit, there's kind of like a slight earthy or savory quality to it. And so they really like it with meat and nutty things, mushrooms. And I just thought it was kind of fun to include food pairings that beyond what I think a lot of us think of as just, let's have some sushi and drink sake. Pear-like note, yeah. Much more drinkable than I was expecting, paired with vegetable sushi. That sounds great. I think if you think of this style and this particular sake as like home base, then you can kind of decide where you want to go from here. It's dry. I agree with Mike that it's got like a little pear kind of thing, or an apple-y kind of thing almost. It has a little bit of weight on the palate, right? It's not super, super like big and huge in the mouth, but it does have some weight. Earthy's coming out on the taste as well. I agree completely. I do. And I think that it's, I don't know if anybody has food other than sushi. If anybody's enjoying anything other than sushi, like shout it out and let us know how it's going with whatever you do have, because I'm curious. I did make other food pairing suggestions in case somebody felt like being a little adventurous. Interesting things about this particular brewery is that it's the third oldest in Japan, and it's a bit north of where the other two are coming from. So it's northeast of Kyoto, and it's where on the back of the label, it says the Seven Spearsmen. It doesn't say it on the front, but it is right by where there was the famous samurai battle. That's where the brewery is. It's like just over the hill from there. So the brewer is now the 15th generation. 15th generation. 15th. I have no way, I don't know what my family was doing 15 generations ago. It's kind of unbelievable to think about that, right? So he's the 15th generation. It's very traditional in Japanese sake breweries to have like the people who work at them and then the owners, run the business part of it. That's a pretty common model. And the guy who's currently the generation who's thought of as in control, actually his mom still runs the business because he said, no, I really want to stay a brewer. I'm like more interested in being the brewing side of things, which I think is just kind of cool. So earthy and floral, some slightly tart fruit on the palate. Yep. Yeah, I think almond is spot on. Yeah, I definitely think almond. Yeah, like almost like a Marcona almond, like that salty almondy thing. I just think it's so delicious. And I mean, at least for me, I'm like, I haven't had sake in a little while, and it's reminding me again of like, oh yeah, it doesn't have the acid of wine, right? It's not that like, yes, Erin just said it. That's so great. I love it. Erin just said the low acidity is so wild to me, right? Because it has, a lot of you are picking up on things like tart fruit and the nuttiness, right? And these kinds of things that then when we wine people kind of translate that to like the kind of wine that might have similar tasting notes. In my head, at least, I'm thinking, yeah. And then there's like the acid that comes in on the finish and, makes your mouth wake up. That's not going to happen with sake. It's not what it's for. That's not how they make it. And that's not what rice does, right? Rice is not a grape. That's just, there we go. Rice is a grain and it's not a fruit. And, it has a different qualities to it. Brain keeps bracing for the acid to hit. I totally agree. I totally agree. I think, with some of the others that we're going to try, they might be different enough from wine that your mind won't be necessarily kind of expecting that. But for this one, it is kind of delicate. It does have these kind of like somewhat familiar flavors, right? I think that it's like a different permutation of some of these flavors, but it's not as like ricey as we're going to get by the end. So what do y'all think? Like what's the overall impression of it? Like, oh, I would drink this, or okay, I'm I'm neutral, or I'm really not happy. I'm curious, qualitatively. Okay, got somebody who enjoys it. That's great. Oh, good. We're getting claps. Okay, great. I'll take it. Please keep weighing in. Oh, yay. Yay, great. Okay. I love it. Okay. I'm glad. Okay, good. It looks like people are open to it. Might want to have it with food. I'm not going to lie. In my personal preference is to use sake with food. It's not something that I'm necessarily going to sit around and just drink, but so if you're like, I'm not quite sure, give it a go with some food. Oh, Meg's saying it goes well with scallion pancakes. That sounds delicious. Yeah. Good. Mellow and drinkable. I agree, right? It's not overpowering in any way. This particular sake, of the three that we're going to taste tonight, this would be the one. If you were interested, this would be the one that you could serve warm. So if that is of interest to you, there are two methods that I'm not going to say recommend, but I will tell you how to do it because I don't love warm sake. So I'm not going to say that I recommend it, but I'll just tell you how to do it if it's like, oh, I'm curious what would happen. You can boil a pot of water, take it off the heat. Yeah, do not microwave. No, don't do that. So boil a pot of water, take it off the heat, and then stick the bottle in there until it's the warmth that you want. So you can drink it. You can drink this particular sake really anywhere along the spectrum that you want. You can drink it like ice cold out of the fridge to hot, like a cup of tea hot, and anywhere in between. So boiling pot of water is probably the easiest way. If you happen to have one of those really charming little teapots that you warm over a votive candle, you can use that, and that's beautiful and gets the job done. But who has those other than my old yoga studio? I don't know. But if you happen to have one, do that. So I'd say feel free to experiment with temperature, but do know that this version that we are all tasting right now has the most acidity, and you're able to pick up on the most flavor with it at about this temperature. This not, I hope that you were able to pull it out of the fridge a little bit. So the not like super, super ice cold version is going to be where you're going to be able to pick up on a number of aromas and flavors, versus too cold, you're not going to get much, and hot, you're not going to get much. So do with that info as you will. You can decide for yourselves how you want to do it. I'm just reading through the notes. Ellen Carlson's asking, does Japan have a grape wine tradition? Oh, sorry, actually her husband, Michael. Or is there a rice-based their equivalent? So they don't have a wine tradition in Japan. The alcohol traditions that they have are shochu, which is a spirit. They make whiskey. I don't know if y'all know that, but Japan makes phenomenal whiskeys. They make sake and they make beer. So their climate, their terrain, not meant for grape growing. So no, they don't. And my understanding, I've learned over the course of kind of prepping for this class, is that they in Japan don't actually drink that much sake. It is more of an international thing. What is soju made from? I'm going to have to look that up, quite honestly. I was trying to remember and I couldn't do it. So I will look it up. Does rice go into any of the beers in Japan? Yes, it does. Yeah, there's a brewery that sadly suffered really, really terribly in the earthquakes a few years ago when the Fukuyama plant was decimated. There was a brewery very close to there, and they made some of my very favorite beers, and they were rice-based beers. So let me take a second and I'm going to look this up. So I misspoke. So soju is Korean and shochu is the slight difference. So I'm going to say, so soju is not the thing. Soju is Korean and soch, I'm going to spell it correctly. Shochu is Japanese. And that's made with various grains. So it can be rice, but it can also be other things. So it's really a grain-based spirits. Kind of like Wisconsin. Oh, Japan is nothing like Wisconsin. Any other questions about the junmai before we move on? Okay, so in prepping for this class, I had some intentions for y'all to taste junmai and then to taste one of the higher grades of sake. That was my best intention, because I do think that it's really quite interesting. So something like a dai ginjo, which would be at least 50% polished. Unfortunately, that that's just not what's available in the Madison market. So there are a few. If you are interested in this, if you leave class tonight and you're like, my palate is like super excited about sake and I want to learn more and I want to go for it, I would be more than happy to talk with you about daiginjos, about what's available, and kind of bring things in for you. From a perspective of a couple of dozen people taking a class, trying to keep things moderately priced, because I know that sake is not like, hey man, I'm just like totally all in. I love it all. Like, give it to me. I didn't feel like it was an appropriate time for me to say like, yeah, we're just going to spend, more than a normal kind of price point. So daiginjos are available. It's really here in Madison. It's more like a when you go out kind of thing, I would say, to explore. So, and one other note while I'm here that I wanted to mention. So junmai that we just tasted was the grade, right, where it has no minimum polishing. However, the word junmai, as you might remember me saying, the word junmai means just rice and water. So it can be used as a modifier for other grades. So with ginjo and daiginjo, you can have just the word ginjo, or you could have it be called a junmai ginjo. It could be called daiginjo or junmai daiginjo. In that scenario, in either of those two classifications, if you see junmai ginjo, you may or may not remember this conversation. But if you do, you might remember like, okay, that's just rice and water, and ginjo is kind of like the next level up, and it's more polished. If it just says ginjo on it, it's still as polished as that, but they are able to add spirits to it, like a neutral spirit to it. So it can have a little more ABV, and it can be not quite as delicate. So that goes for ginjo and daiginjo. So if you see just those words without the modifier of junmai, it does mean that there's most likely spirits added to it, and it might be slightly different. So heads up, there are certain parts of Japan where they kind of go for that more, like that's the more common accepted style. And again, that's kind of something that you can learn over time if you are like super, super into sake. But I know that it's a lot of words and terms and classification systems and things like that. So I don't kind of want to overwhelm everybody. So my intention was to pour you a junmai and then one of the more polished ones, and then the one that we're going to end with. When that didn't become available, or when the higher kind of classification wasn't available, I did some chatting with the person who supplies us with the sake, who's somebody who taught me about sake about 20 years ago. And we talked about like, well, what would be an interesting third one to try? And that is how we ended up with this delightful, delightful drink that you're about to have. So what you have is a sparkling sake. So about 20-ish years ago, sparkling sakes were created to make young people in Japan actually drink sake. So the young folks in Japan see sake as outdated, not that interesting. It's something that like American tourists are interested in, and old folks. And like, we're not into it. We're into whiskey and we're into beer. So the Muramoto brewery was like, well, let's like wow people with something new. So the brewer there went and studied in Belgium and studied beer brewing in Belgium, and came home and was like, let's do this. So sparkling sake was created to sell more sake. It goes through secondary fermentation in the bottle, just like champagne. Typically, they are creamy on the mouthfeel a little bit more. And the effervescence is not big, fat bubbles like champagne. It is definitely like lighter bubbles. Some of you were talking about the first one. Yes, Alexis just not noticed it. Some of you were talking on the first one about, oh, this is so drinkable. Well, this one is only 5% ABV. So watch out. It's kind of like a hard seltzer, right? So Meg is saying peach angel food cake, and I adore that. I adore that. So the brewery website says peaches and cream. That's what they say on their website. Pardon me for 1 second. I'm having a technology thing. Okay. Oh, or Mike Crane says, or Bartles and James. Well, I hope we don't think about Bartles and James. I don't know. That reminds me of real drunk high school experiences that I don't want to think about, but strong nostalgic cream soda flavor. Oh, so interesting. Yeah. Emily saying could drink it on her porch all summer long. I love it. So from a food pairing perspective, there's like the obvious, like, you know, some of you are picking up on, you know, the cream soda thing, the peachy fruity thing, right? That kind of thing. So you can pair this with dessert. This is the sweetest of the three that we are going to taste. They make another one. They make a pink one that is even sweeter. And I really didn't think that that would be of interest to folks. I felt like this had just the right amount of sweetness to get our palates excited without it being too much. So I worked at a restaurant years ago where we would often pour this, the huhushu, with a soft ripened cheese course. So it would be with kind of like an ooey gooey, not like too stinky, but like a decently stinky soft cheese. And it played the same role as like a fruit or a jam compote kind of thing that you would have on a cheese plate. It's just so delightful. The question was asked, why is this particularly good for delicate sushi? Because it itself is delicate. Because it is only 5%, because it's not particularly weighty in the mouth. You don't necessarily want to pair it with, you know, like your kind of really like either pungent flavors or you're like really fatty fish. Like that's just not where this is, because unlike other things that are effervescent, where it would kind of like strip your mouth of it, right? Like where beer would kind of cleanse the palate. This, again, doesn't have the acidity that our other drinks do, the drinks that we drink probably more commonly. And so this doesn't have that acidity. So it's not necessarily going to clear the palate in the exact same way. So here is a time where it would pair really beautifully with something equally delicate. The peachy thing, I say go after it and pair it with something with peaches, but not, you know, not pork and peaches necessarily. Although it might be super tasty, but I just think it's a little too delicate for meat. We would, at the place where I worked, there were definitely people who were like, what are you doing? Like you're pouring this sake for me for dessert, and they're kind of looking at you like, are you bananas? And you're like, oh no, you're going to be so happy because, you know, at the end of a long meal like that, your palate's kind of done, right? And this is just kind of like something nice and light and easy. We have confirmation that it pairs well with cucumber rolls, so that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear it. I believe that's on my menu later. I'm not sure what's on my menu later, something along those lines. So yeah, so that's great. I also wanted to mention that the name, I just kind of like love this so much that I have to share it. So the name Huhushu means bubble, bubble, pop, which I just think is adorable. When it first came to the market, and now I'm learning that, you know, the brewery started making this in like 2005. So it was probably like right when they first started making it that I first learned about this sake. It had a different label, and it had a little cartoon character on it, and it had like a little straw that came with it. And it really did look like a kid's drink. Like it straight up looked like something children should drink. I was like, I'm not so sure about this, but I like the new packaging a little bit more. Aaron's asking, could you make a sangria with it? Absolutely. I think that sounds fantastic. Be mindful of the spirits that you're using in your sangria so that they don't completely overpower it. Because, you just have to kind of get your mix right, because I wouldn't want what's all that would be left would be like well, that's different. Like, because there is a riciness, right? There's something that makes this noticeably sake-like. And so I wouldn't want you to have a sangria that goes like way too off the rails if you use like overpowering spirits. So I would say something like this with like stone fruits, right? Go after the peach, apricot kind of thing, maybe a little citrus if you want a little bit of acidity, and then kind of your light or clear spirits would be beautiful with this, I think. Yeah. Katya and Drew were saying the bubbles make up for the acid for me, and that's Drew's comment, and I agree. I do think that the bubbles kind of give you that thing that can feel like it's lacking in other things. Mike saying it reminds you of a Lambrusco pairing with soba noodles. Go for it. I mean, I'm not going to say no, I think, yes, it is something that is sparkling that might not normally be sparkling. So I guess that would be the correlation to Lambrusco. Laura says it's delicious with brie, right? It's so good with cheese, and it doesn't make as much sense as some of the other pairings. Like, it's like, why would that work? But it does. It really, really does. And Heather and Tegan are saying that they had it with shortbread cookies, and it was great. So good. I'm so glad. And I think the bubbles here help with the sweetness without it being cloying. Because you can get like, weird sweet sake that I don't think is all that delicious. Is there anybody who's like not digging on this? Anybody who's like, no, thank you? It's okay. I didn't make it. Quiet. I'm going to assume that means no. I don't know. Really good, but getting a bit sweet for me after a glass. Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I don't think that it's necessarily something that I would want lots and lots of. But someone else, I think Mike Crane earlier said that it was kind of like Moscato. And like, I don't think it's that sweet. I have to be really honest. Like, it's not into that land for me. But like Moscato, it's like that little bit of something gently sweet. I don't necessarily want it with, I wouldn't want like, glasses and glasses of it with dinner. Yeah. Ooh, we'll drink with flaky crackers, triple cream, soft cheese, and plum jam. That sounds phenomenal. Please do. If it's lingering in the sake glass or sake cups, yeah, I would assume so. Like, this is definitely going for a newer market. Right? It's not going for like the little cute ceramic or, like little cups. That's not what it's for. Like, the idea is to kind of drink it like in a champagne flute or something more like, or, even like a tulip, like you would drink a beer, like a Belgian beer in, like that. It would be more like that. So maybe it's amazing the difference that glassware can make, right? It really can. So tastes like what I imagine fizzy lifting drink from Willy Wonka would taste like. Oh my God, I love that. I love that so much, Caitlin. I think that is just amazing. If you guys don't know the Willy Wonka reference, I don't know if anybody doesn't, but if you don't, Willy Wonka has all these amazing concoctions, and one of them is something called fizzy lifting drink. And, you drink it and you start to bubble up. And like, with it being called bubble, bubble, pop, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, it's like all bubbly and fun. Cool. Any questions about this? There aren't that many available in the market, sparkling sakes. But my understanding is that it is working. The interest in Japan and abroad is there. People are seeing that like, it has a little crossover appeal. The other one that the brewery makes that is available to us is sweeter than this. So if you were interested in it, it is pink. It's made from red rice and it is pink. Pardon me, and it's made even sweeter. So if you want to have a brunch kind of something with a little something sweet, let me know. All right. last but most definitely not least is the nigiri. So, and I don't know if I mentioned, but the brewery on that, Morimoto, is down by Fukuyama. It's actually right by where the earthquake happened. So you will notice right away that this is unfiltered. And so that's what nigiri designates. You can, if you like, swirl and get more of the rice particles up. You can also drink it as you would like an unfiltered saison beer, and kind of let it, but just be very mindful of the fact that like that last glass, if you aren't kind of stirring and getting some of the particles as you go, I shouldn't say stirring, swirling, right? Stirring some stuff up. If you're not doing that, that last glass is going to be thick. So be aware of that. I would recommend getting a little bit of it kind of as you drink. So they are unfiltered. They go through a coarser sieve than the others. So they have more body, and they definitely have more creaminess to them. Typically, the sweetness in a nigori is higher than the other styles. So typically, higher than a junmai, something like that. This one is not that. This one is brewed dry. So I picked it kind of with y'all in mind, because I knew, that people were gonna probably not be super psyched about sweet and creamy. So from a food pairing perspective, you can go pretty rich with this. The brewery really recommends meat, really, like they're like, this is your burger sake, as well as spice. So if you can kind of imagine, like when you have that hella hot curry and you are like, well, I should have a glass of milk, right? I want something that like calms down my palate. This would kind of stand in for that. That creaminess really helps. And here is a time when, from a pairing perspective, you kind of want like with like. From a sushi perspective, you can absolutely 100% drink this with any sushi you want, and you'll probably be happy. But if you noticed, like if you did this with a cucumber roll versus like fatty tuna, you might notice like, it kind of works better with a richer, bigger dish. So it's not going to be bad. None of these are bad with, a variety of sushi, but I just kind of wanted to be more precise. I'm seeing it reminds you of coconut water. Interesting. Tastes like honeydew melon. Yeah. Smells like brie, tastes like Asian pear, lychee. Yeah. Okay. We got all sorts of like awesome tasting notes that I think is great. I totally get the brie smell. That's so cool. I would not have gotten there on my own, but I'm picking up what you're putting down. I like it. Leaves a bit of a buzzy feeling on our lips. Ooh, I don't know what that. On your lips. Maybe my lipstick's getting in the way. Does anybody have anybody else experiencing that? That's curious to me. I like that. So we went down in ABV there in the middle. We took a little jag. And now we're back up to 15%. So somebody asked the question early on if the polishing kind of matters in terms of ABV, and it doesn't vary that much. So you'll notice that these bottles are all small sizes. So the most common sizes are these smaller ones, these 300 mLs, or a 720, which is basically just shy of a wine bottle size. I love the fact that most sakes are available in a 300 ml, because it's like, to me, it's kind of like the amount that you want. So you don't have to, commit quite as much as you might Travis is saying it's pretty drying in your mouth, almost tastes like gummy candy. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's so great. So Alexis asked the question that I want to get to in just a hot second. So the question was, how long do they last once they're open? And I will get to that in just a second. Is the 0.2.10 on the bottle referring to sweetness scale? No, I don't believe so. I believe that's the lot number. The sweetness scale would have, it does on their website, has much more information. So no, I don't believe so, no. And Travis, you said almost tastes like gummy candy and it's drying in your mouth. And so interestingly, they point out that it is almost chewy in your mouth. So I wonder if it's like a textural thing for you, that it's kind of like drawing that correlation with gummy candies, because it has that kind of almost chewiness to it. I had someone who I don't believe is with us live tonight, and I'm not sure if they'll be watching later on or not, but I had someone ask me a few weeks ago, as I was kind of right after I'd announced this class, and they asked if I knew what I was going to be pouring. And I said, well, not yet. You know, I got to kind of see what's available and whatever. And they said, because they know that they really love unfiltered sakes. And I said, oh, don't worry. There will absolutely be an unfiltered sake in the lineup, because that's my favorite style. Oh, Emily. Oh, good. Oh, Emily, I'm so glad you're watching live. Oh, I'm so glad. That's wonderful. Yay. And I just really like the style. I like the weight of them. I like the fruitiness. Now, again, I did mention that often they do veer a little sweeter than this one. So you might not necessarily find that you like all nigori. But it was, for me, when I first started learning, I tasted, a junmai, and I was kind of like, okay, I don't love it. I don't hate it. I tasted, kind of the higher level, the daiginjo, and all that's going to happen as you get more and more polished is it's more and more delicate. The aromas, the flavors are even more kind of like, you have to really be very mindful. And I enjoy that kind of drinking, but it's not obvious. And then I tasted a nigori, and I was like, I love this. And I don't think it's like too bold, but I love them. I think there's something so satisfying about them. So Emily, I'm so happy that you're watching live tonight. That's great. And if you weren't, you were watching the recording, I'd be happy too, but yay, I'm so glad. Alexis asked the question of how long do these last once they're open? You've got time, friends. You do not have to drink these immediately. So, and when I say time, I mean like many weeks. You've got a lot of time. The hoo-hoo shoe, I would say, would drink that one the fastest, right? You've got the effervescence that will die down. From my times in the restaurant where we used it, like the bubbles don't even last the next day. So I would say if you're going to finish one tonight, have it be the bubbles. And it's low in ABV, so it's just kind of like not going to last as long. But the junmai and the nigori are going to last you for a while, so you do not have to like guzzle. If you want to guzzle, go for it, but you don't have to guzzle. Drew's saying that it's the favorite sake of the night. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Is there? I know I've definitely like put it out there what I like, but is anybody not enjoying this style? Is anybody like, no thanks, that mouth feels weird, or like, I just don't like the flavors? You can be quiet, but if you're out there and you're being quiet and you don't like it, I would say don't necessarily try a nigori sake. That's really, it's a really easy thing to avoid, right? And you can tell, right? You can look. Right? You can see it, that it is, right? So any place worth their salt, any restaurant that's serving sake worth their salt would definitely have it like listed as such, called out, maybe its own separate category on a list or something like that. So you'd be able to tell there. And then if you're shopping for yourself somewhere and you see one that looks cloudy like this, you would know like, oh, that was that style, and I'm not so sure. Caitlin and Mike, probably our favorite of the three, but for me, this class highlighted how much I enjoy the acidity of wine. Oh, that's like, that's sweet, right? Like, that's great for me to know that like, oh yeah, right? Acid has its place, right? And we like it. Katya says not for her, but she likes the sparkling. Great. That's awesome. I'm glad. And Laura, new to us, and we really like it. Good. I'm glad. I'm curious if you're out there, the people who drink a lot of sake, there were a couple folks who who drink it a lot. I'm curious to hear from the frequent sake drinkers, if they had if they have a preference, if there's a style that they gravitate towards more. I'm just kind of curious. But we have a couple of minutes. I'm curious if anybody has any lingering questions, anything you're wondering, and what people's faves were. Some people have started to weigh in and tell me what their favorites are, but I'm curious what others. And I can't say that, like, I can't say for 100% that this is my favorite, because that hoo-hoo-shoo is like so much fun to me that I'm not, they're both delicious. And I shouldn't knock the junmai. I do like it. I just think the, it's, it's like, I don't know. It's like your reliable friend who might not be your most exciting friend, but the one who's always there for you, right? Yeah. We often have sake with takeout sushi. Always like the first selection, which we love. Okay, cool. Oh, cool. So Emily was saying that she was one of the frequent drinkers and that they usually go for unfiltered, but that the sparkling was a fun surprise. I'm so glad, right? It's just so different, right? It's just like a completely different flavor profile. Before this, I usually gravitated towards just the junmai, as I like the nuttiness. Yep. Oh, cool. Oh, great. I'm glad to kind of expose you to the nigiri, right? And it's a good point. Jennifer points out that the other grades tend to get a little more floral. So when I was talking about kind of like the delicate flavors, you kind of move away from nuts and you move into like kind of floral notes. And that can be exactly what people want, and that can be not at all what people want. So heads up about that as you explore more. Nigori is the favorite for us both. I'm obsessed with the sparkling. Oh, cool. I'm glad. Alexis is asking, is the ABV close to accurate, or is a variance percentage allowed? It's a great question, and I can't say that I know 100% for sure. I do believe that it is close to accurate. So if there is any variance allowed, it would be small. It would be similar to the EU 1%, but I don't know for sure, and I don't think it's much, because you'll see like on the junmai, they list 15 to 16%. Right? So they, I believe, my understanding is that they're more precise. It's not like the US. It's not like the US. We're not so good. One of us is 3-2-1. The other one is 2-3-1. We've got a 3. Cool. Much more enjoyable than other nigoris that you've had. I agree. And I think that that's probably the dryness. And I also think Johto is like a really great, so they are a good example of a co-op at its very best. So they are, they buy sake from sake breweries in Japan, specifically for the American market. And so I think that they know what they're doing. They want to appeal to us, and not in a bad way, not in a dumb way, not making it stupid, just like in a making sake accessible for people who might not know it so well. And Laura's saying 1-3-2. So sparkling was like not the favorite. I love it. I love the variance. I really do. It means a lot to me when people have differing opinions. And I know I did my job, right, in exposing everybody to all the different things. Are there any lingering questions as we come up on time? 2-1-3. Oh, so interesting, Alexis. I would have thought you would like the creaminess. Curious. I love to see it. Fave cocktails with sake in them? I don't know that I've had one I like. If other people have a sake cocktail that they like, feel free to throw it out. I mentioned that there's a yuzu infused sake coming to the shop, and the few that I've had, it's just yuzu and sake, but it has like a whole different flavor. It's kind of like a sake based margarita. A sake Mary. Oh, curious. All right, I'll believe you guys. As we come up on time, I want to say thank you guys so much for sake class. I'm really, really glad. And I have a class next Saturday evening. It's a little bit later in time, but it is with Mary Taylor. She is a wine importer that we work with. She's amazing. And enrollment's a little low for that class, and I would love to see a lot of people there because Mary's calling in from her home to join us. And she's a rock star, and her wines are awesome, and they're all very, very affordable. So we're going to carry 3 new wines. Tomorrow I'm going to announce it, and it's going to be 3 new Mary Taylor wines that we've never carried at the shop before. So if that's of interest to you, there's that. And then Tuscany is coming up at the end of the month. And then I will be announcing May soon. There are going to be fewer wine classes for a while. As the world opens back up, as people start to travel more, and as virtual events, as people start to time out on these things, I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you all so much. Yay. I'm so glad. And Emily, I'm glad to see that the food pairings helped. I'm so glad. Okay, great. Thank you all so much. Let me know if you have any lingering questions. I'm here for you.